Ever since The Last Jedi came out, it seems like Rian Johnson has set this trend of subverting the audience's expectations. The idea being that the writer challenges or defies the viewer's preconceived notions on how the story will unfold. So usually this technique involves avoiding cliches, creating surprise and shock, and engaging in meta-commentary. However, if you boil this all down, writers often just take the logical conclusion of the narrative and flip it on its head. Oh, you think that Luke is going to be a wise master who teaches Rey how to use the Force? No, he's just an old dick that refuses to teach her anything. You think that Thor might be the lead in his own movie? No, it's 56-year-old Natalie Portman and her CGI muscles. Did you think that James Bond was going to be a super secret agent who drinks martinis and sleeps with a bunch of hot ladies? He's washed up now, and nobody takes him seriously, let alone finds him sexy. Do you think that the greatest television show of all time was going to have a good ending?
You are my queen. Now and always.
So what does it mean to successfully subvert the audience's expectations? Ideally, this means delivering a twist or unexpected development that enhances the story instead of confusing or alienating the audience. For subversion to work well in a narrative, it needs to feel earned by aligning with the established themes, characters, and rules of the world that the story is set in. It needs to both surprise the viewer while also working within the logic of the plot. However, some writers seem to think that simply inverting a narrative at the last minute is a wild and crazy idea that is supposed to knock the audience on its ass. How dare you think that all this stuff that we led you to believe was going to happen? Sit down, you childish idiot. Nothing is what you think it is. Simply leading a story on to change everything just before its natural conclusion isn't interesting or surprising, it's fucking annoying. Sure, there might be a moment of shock, but once the reality of what just happened sets in, everyone walks away questioning what they just saw. Having characters that have had years of development change on a dime feels pretty empty, especially when it's done for a cheap thrill. Like, everyone was pretty surprised when Daenerys burned King's Landing, but then they thought, wait, wasn't she some kind of humanitarian aid worker or something? My point is that people get thrown out of a story pretty quickly if they have to stop and ask themselves too many questions. The less this happens in a movie or TV show, the better. Writers want the audience to be immersed in the narrative and not have the time to think about anything besides how much they're enjoying the show. The reason directors like Christopher Nolan are so popular is because he's able to take complicated topics and ideas and explain them in a way that it's easy to understand. We can watch movies like Inception and comprehend the rules of the dreamscape. Sure, we might walk away with some questions, like, is the ending a dream or is it reality? Why isn't Joseph Gordon-Levitt in anything anymore? Is it because he made a movie about being addicted to pornography and masturbation? However, these are the kinds of things that Nolan wants us to be curious about. It adds a layer of mystery to the film. It doesn't hinder the overall viewing experience, it adds to it. This is very different from Star Wars The Last Jedi. I don't think that Rian Johnson wanted fans walking out of the film asking questions like, why did the purple-haired chick not tell anyone her plan? Or, who is Snoke? What was his goal? Where did he come from? Is he Darth Plagueis? And I especially don't think that Rian wanted the entire fanbase to turn against him. You see, the audience isn't stupid, and even if they didn't notice something right away, there's still a subconscious feeling of uncertainty and unease for the whole experience. People walk away feeling off about a movie if it fails to follow solid storytelling. When a movie is missing key elements like foreshadowing major changes in a narrative, people don't like it. So I guess in the end, he subverted his own expectations.
That's great.
How does it feel, Ryan, you fuck? So now you may be wondering if the idea of subverting the audience's expectations can be done properly. And how many times is this guy gonna say subverting expectations in this video? Probably a lot more. And yes, of course it can be done well, but don't you dare bring up Knives Out. That movie should be called Knives in My Ears and Eyes because that's all I wanted to do after I watched that shitty film. No, I'm talking about one of the greatest films of all time, and my personal favorite, No Country for Old Men. So let's dive into this movie and break down how it succeeds where so many other films failed. Number 1. Thematic Consistency. To quickly summarize the plot, the film takes place in Texas in 1980. Our hero, Llewellyn Moss, stumbles across a drug deal gone bad when he finds a satchel filled of $2 million in cash. After taking the money, he is chased by both the Mexican cartel and a mysterious hitman named Anton Chigurh. Following closely behind them is Sheriff Ed Tom Bell, who is trying to help Moss and stop Chigurh. Over the course of the film, there are some shootouts and chases as these different parties hunt for both Llewellyn and the money. However, in the climax of the film, Llewellyn dies off screen and Chigurh retrieves the briefcase. The film ends with Anton getting in a car accident, only to walk away before the police arrive. And Bell is left to reflect on his feelings of powerlessness in a world of growing chaos and uncertainty. So the film is considered to be a neo-Western because it holds some classic Western tropes in a contemporary setting. It has the rugged landscape of West Texas, cowboys and sheriffs wearing white hats while the bad guys wear black. There are themes of lawlessness and justice, and on the surface it's a simple story about the search for a bunch of money and competing parties trying to find it. But it's also got things like drug trafficking and silenced shotguns. So while the film is instantly recognizable on the surface, the audience is also set up to realize that this is not a traditional Western story because everything is a mirror version instead of a direct retelling. No Country for Old Men is ultimately about chaos, violence, and the relentless nature of the world. So when the audience is denied the usual tropes, like the classic final showdown, we're not angry at the movie. It remains shocking without being antagonistic to the viewer because it fits the themes that the film had set up from the beginning. This world is filled with chaos, so it's not out of place for things to feel off balance in the film. It's an exploration into the philosophy of the story. It fits into the narrative and doesn't feel like some out-of-place nonsense. Or that the writers are trying to punish us for watching their fucking movie in the first place. Rian Johnson failed to realize that he was going against the established themes of Star Wars when he made The Last Jedi. He wanted to shit on the ideas of stuff like hope, redemption, and legacy, which was the thematic backbone of the Star Wars series. No Country for Old Men tells its own story, and prepares its audience subconsciously for this different viewing experience. Rian Johnson, on the other hand, was taking a 40-year-old saga and doing a thematic 180 on the audience without much warning. He took the character of Luke and made him mean and cynical, when the last time anyone saw him, he was the pinnacle of hope and redemption. It all felt unnatural and weird instead of new and innovative. If Rian wanted to make something so different from the rest of the franchise, he should have made a whole new series instead of trying to take an already established story and changing it. The Coen brothers made a new film that deconstructed the Western genre. They didn't make the Fourth Dollars film so they could insult Clint Eastwood's character. Number 2. Character consistency and foreshadowing. One of Game of Thrones' biggest issues was character assassinations. Characters like Jaime and Daenerys went completely against their development in the final season of the show. Jaime going back to Cersei and Daenerys burning King's Landing were surprising writing choices, but only because it went against the very foundations of these characters and what they stood for. We saw Jaime go from an arrogant and selfish attempted child murderer to a selfless hero who wanted to save the world. But this was all torn apart when the writers wanted to surprise us by having him go back on everything he had accomplished. Also that he could get killed by a brick. Foreshadowing is of course a large part of creating a compelling twist. It's important because it gives a sense of cohesion and fairness to storytelling. It helps provide the audience with subtle clues and hints that when the twist is revealed, it doesn't feel forced or out of place. It again makes the shock feel earned rather than being random and forced on the viewer. Unlike Game of Thrones, No Country for Old Men does not betray its characters to shock the viewers. Llewellyn, Chigurh, and Ed Tom are consistent throughout the story, and their endings reflect their strong development. For example, none of us were expecting this to happen. This scene may feel random at first, but becomes eerily familiar once you realize that, like Llewellyn, Anton is also subjected to the rules of chance and fate. This scene encapsulates Chigurh's whole philosophy of the coin toss and brings his story full circle. Ed Tom Bell's retirement from police work is another natural conclusion to the character and one that is consistently foreshadowed throughout the story. In Bell's opening monologue, the character longs for a bygone era and believes that he cannot keep up with an ever-changing and crazy world.
You can't help but compare yourself against the old-timers. Can't help but wonder how they'd have operated these times. I always knew you had to be willing to die to even do this job. But I don't want to push my chips forward and go out and meet something I don't understand.
After failing to stop characters like Anton, Bell sees that his time has passed as a lawman, invoking the title of the film itself, that there is no country for old men. The world moves on without them. Bell's story manages to be subversive while also being natural to the plot. What makes it surprising is that we as the audience are used to the idea that the lawman will catch the villain and stop the evil forces in the story. No Country for Old Men does not offer such a comforting ending to the audience, and therefore the movie plays against the predictability of the genre, while at the same time keeping consistent with its characters. Had Bell decided to stay on as sheriff and hunt down Anton, it would have felt out of place, as it would have been too heroic and stereotypical to fit into the story. Game of Thrones not only failed to foreshadow Jaime's death in any way, but in fact had gone against the hints and clues that they had previously set up. There were plenty of references to Jaime being the one to actually kill Cersei, and his character development up until season 8 had reflected that. So to have him get killed trying to save Cersei felt out of place and unnatural to the character's fate. So whether it's the ending of tumbling bricks or a car crash, the finale of a character's story arc should always be reflective of their journey as a whole. You can't go back on years of character development at the last second and expect people to love it. Crazy twists and surprises need to be foreshadowed from early on in the story, so that the audience can realize that the seeds of these ideas were planted from the beginning. Failing to do this is stupid and dumb, and it makes me angrier than that time that Kennedy almost ratted out the CIA. Thank God for Oswald, you glorious man. You made the world a safer place. Keep American secrets safe. Keep those fucking hipsters away from Area 51. It's none of their goddamn business what goes on there anyway. Jolly West, now that's a real American hero. You see what I did there? I mean, you could almost say that I subverted your...
That's great.
Conclusion. So yeah, if you wanted to be creative and play around with cliches and tropes in your story, the best thing you can do is try to build these ideas into the plot more naturally. Good storytelling balances surprise with consistency. Foreshadowing key moments early on will enhance the narrative and solidify big twists down the line. Ultimately, when audiences invest in a long-running franchise like Star Wars or Game of Thrones, they expect a level of payoff and consistency from the story. It's not about delivering a happy ending per se, but ensuring that the conclusion fits the themes and the logic of the world that's been established. Poor subversion breaks the trust of the audience and results in heavy backlash. However, a successful subversion rewards the audience's investment. No Country for Old Men resonates with audiences because these moments of subversion feel earned. The movie doesn't shock people for the sake of it, it builds on its own foreshadowing, themes, and characters, making it a more interesting and deep take on the genre. So if you're a writer, don't take an already established story and sabotage everything that you can about it and call it a surprise. It's lazy and insulting to the audience. But despite this warning, it's going to keep happening. And like communism, people are going to keep trying it. Then there's going to be mass disappointment and unemployment, and people will get mad, probably a famine. Millions of people will die. And you thought this video was about subverting expectations? No, it's about the Cold War and how we gotta stop the Reds, you idiot. Hey, start brainwashing those goddamn North Koreans. Get Reagan on the phone, he's gonna wanna hear this. Give me your Karl Marx. I ain't gonna hurt you.
Instincts going no, looking bad like a bat with an eye patch. All black through the woods with a backpack and a lit match. Spark one time, get the whole city looking like a dark shade of orange when I burn it down. What it is, what it do, whole clique getting live on the talk of the town. Let my city had a mouth and